The site receives over 1 million unique visitors per month and has over 45,000 public documents and over 7,000 archived images. This is a very scholarly site, and they really take the effort and the time to review what's posted and to really try to connect it with the research and make sure it's factually accurate. Earth has written and edited thousands of documents published online, and his writings have also appeared in publications such as the Resonance Project, the Entheogen Review, Cato Unbound, and Trip magazine. Fire Erowid co-created Erowid.org in 1995 as well. She has been the principal designer and chief editor of Erowid since its inception. Fire has innovated and developed drug information designs that have been emulated across the web. Her work is cited by newspapers, books, school education programs, college classes, and professional seminars around the world. She and Earth have spoken at conferences sponsored by groups as diverse as the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the North American Association of Clinical Toxicologists, the Mycological Society of San Francisco, and Mind States. So please welcome Earth and Fire Erowid.
I'm Fire.
As Terence said about a similar conference series, I sort of think of these get-togethers. They happen periodically, cyclically, but unscheduled, as State of the Stone addresses, or an opportunity for the community to come together and everybody see who's here once again, who has survived, who's gotten out, so forth and so on.
As we near the 10th anniversary of Terence's death, we thought that we'd follow his lead with a variant of the State of the Stone address. There are multiple ways of reading the phrase State of the Stone. Perhaps the primary meaning of Terence's stone is the philosopher's stone, the status of the quest for enlightenment, or perhaps the quest for the ideal tool to facilitate enlightenment. As Terence put it, the goal of alchemy is the redemption of spirit from matter. Perhaps that could be restated as generating mind from substance.
That can also be thought of, the State of the Stone can be thought of as a more prosaic issue of what psychoactive drugs are currently available, what psychoactive technologies are available, the state of the art of getting stoned.
Or yet more broadly, the state of the stoned or psychedelic community.
The State of the Stone could also be thought of as the latest and greatest in available mind states, and separated or isolated from what drugs or technologies are available, but what can the mind achieve?
Defining the state of the now is about acknowledging history, experiencing the present, and what paths we're wandering into the future.
As we thought about this conference and about the research being done by Bill and Stephen and Franz, Alicia, and all the rest of them around the world, we debated what defines this moment in time in the history of psychedelics.
What are the connecting points between the past, the now, and the future? What are the unique aspects? How is the now different? What is important about this particular now?
Just as what drugs were available 10, 20, 40, or even 100 years ago affect or define what it is we're talking about at this conference today and what research is being done, so too will the psychoactives that are available today affect what research is done in the future.
The now is the history of the future. The things you're doing now, this conference that you're attending, the articles you're writing, the topics you're blogging, the organizations you're supporting, the research you're participating in, the products you're buying, the psychedelics you're using, will be retained in the consciousness of our culture as it looks back on this now.
From our vantage point on the visionary sphere, one of the most interesting in the state of, and looking at the State of the Stone, one of the most interesting things is what psychoactive substances are available and what psychoactive substances are shaping the psychonautical mind of today. And the swirling developments around a packaged, smokable product called Spice, we think, are particularly interesting.
In late 2006, a new product became available that was marketed as a legal herbal cannabis replacement. It was produced in slick, professional Mylar packaging and sold online and in European head shops for $20 to $50 for an eighth of an ounce. That's as expensive as cannabis is itself.
Interestingly, the distributors chose not to sell it into the United States. They did not, they told their distributors not to sell it to vendors in the United States, and they actually printed on some packaging not for sale in the United States.
The packaging lists 13 herbs and spices, including baybean, blue lotus, dwarf skullcap, Indian warrior, lion's tail, Macona brava, marshmallow, pink lotus, red clovers, rose, Siberian motherwort, vanilla, and honey.
Several of those are known to be mildly psychoactive by themselves, which was clearly why the manufacturers chose to include them in this long and exotic collection of herbs and spices. Who knows, when you mix all those substances together, what effects that has, or perhaps the effects are just like cannabis.
But spice started to seem different than other such products. There have been herbal cannabis replacements for more than 40 years, but people described the effects of spice as very similar to cannabis, which is uncommon for a cannabis replacement, really. So we decided to try it for ourselves. It immediately seemed like it contained a cannabinoid and not just miscellaneous herbs.
There's a particular feel to smoking cannabis that isn't really very similar to anything else.
It seems very unlikely to result from some synergy between other herbs.
The spice seemed like it contained either cannabis or some cannabis extract or some sort of synthetic cannabinoid.
So we had a sample analyzed by a lab in 2007 and asked them specifically to look for THC and other cannabinoids, but they were unable to identify any psychoactive chemicals in it. So that ruled out cannabis.
There was a lot of, and then in 2008, there started being a lot of media coverage of spice in Europe, particularly in Germany, a little bit in Britain. And spurred on by the media attention in publications in Europe as large as Der Spiegel, which is one of the largest publications in Germany. A cannabinoid specializing lab finally identified in December 2008 a chemical in spice called JWH018, an obscure synthetic cannabinoid agonist.
Soon after, US Customs reported that spice that they had seized contained a chemical called HU210, another research cannabinoid, although that finding has since been disputed.
In January of this year, 2009, in the Journal of Mass Spectrometry, another German cannabinoid lab identified the primary active substance as a close homologue of CP47497, a cannabinoid receptor agonist not previously seen on the recreational market. A cannabinoid agonist is a term that we're using is for a chemical that triggers the endogenous or the natural or in the body and brain cannabinoid system. Instead of just calling them cannabinoids, which suggests that they actually are shaped like THC, and you can see that they're similar. You can see the way that they might fit into the same receptors, but they're not. CP47497 is often not considered a cannabinoid itself.
Almost immediately after that was announced, Germany banned JWH018 and a number of variants of CP47497, and the UK will reportedly also ban some of the chemicals in spice soon.
It's still unknown what the risks of smoking these research cannabinoids are. Large epidemiological and experimental data have shown that cannabis itself, smoking it, does not involve that many acute risks other than those of general inebriation.
Even extended heavy cannabis use does not appear to cause brain damage, nor substantial increases in risk of lung cancer or heart disease in healthy users. And it causes only moderate increases in respiratory illness. But we don't know if that is true of spice or related products that are for sale now.
THC might even has even been shown to have anti-cancer properties in a number of experiments and has been shown to be neuroprotective. Cannabis is also known for causing some people to have very strong anxiety or paranoid ideation effects.
The triggering of psychotic symptoms is perhaps the top cannabis-related health issue receiving research attention in the last decade. Some novel cannabinoids might not cause paranoia and might be less likely to trigger latent psychosis, so there is value in continuing to explore new THC-like compounds.
This is a close-up of spice, and you can see that there's actually several different herbs and there are little seeds that you get to smoke if you smoke that stuff. Even if spice had the same effects as cannabis, which it doesn't, it would still be interesting because it's a novel product with new packaging and interesting and novel distribution style.
The reality is that each unique chemical has a slightly different effects profile and likely a different group of individuals who then prefer it. Some people describe that they can't smoke cannabis because it makes them too paranoid, but they find that spice doesn't have that effect.
One of the things we've learned in the last 15 years working on Erowid, in part through the creations of Sasha Shulgin, is that if you make 40 different substances with effects that are all just slightly different from each other, even if all of the chemicals have effects that are similar to LSD, some people will prefer one and some people another, though LSD might continue to be the most popular of the set.
And spice is just one of many research chemicals available since the DEA's big crackdown in 2004 on the phenethylamine and tryptamine research chemicals. Operation Web Trip resulted in the arrest and conviction of several vendors and a brief hiatus in the online recreational drug shopping spree.
The only reason that the now of drug availability, the research chemical phenomenon, the spice phenomenon can exist is because of the explosion of communication technology. It really is a revolution, a sharp, rapid evolution in communication.
With sharing and consuming technologies at an all-time peak. A large number of people, especially younger people, and probably many of you, carry devices with them at all times that can access up-to-the-minute advances in psychoactive developments, products, news, as well as all of the archives and historical records of psychoactive culture, from Maria Sabina chants to Bill Hicks routines, to recordings of Leary lectures, television news reports about psychedelic research in the 60s, clips from Woodstock, theories of the psychedelic origins of religion, all broken out into bite-sized chunks designed to ingest on the bus on the way to work.
How many people here have a web-enabled device? Yeah. Communication technology is driving the now of psychoactive drugs. The state of the stone is only what it is because of these digital technologies. And everyone with full access to the internet can feel like they're deeply part of a deeply participatory member of the psychedelic subculture. They can find their own favorite flavor of subculture.
As new communication technologies unfold, we get closer and closer to everyone's raw, unfiltered internal dialogue. Twittering is a lot like hearing brain noise.
And unfortunately, with all of the shiny, fun new communication toys come complexities. Posting, forwarding, blogging, re-blogging, re-blogging rapidly becomes kind of a cacophony of information and opinion.
And there can be a great deal of communication without communicating anything important or real.
It's possible, as you probably know, to spend all of your time consuming a large volume of media that's just waiting to be consumed. And yet, there's a way in which doing that, you can just be continuously intellectually swimming in a mirrored fishbowl.
Are you learning something new? How often are you actually gaining new understandings?
Communication leading to understanding is really, really difficult. The two of us have been together for a little over 20 years now, and from the very beginning, of our relationship, the primary working concept was that communication is everything.
But even between two people working very hard to communicate and understand each other, it's not easy. One practical and fairly simple method that we'd suggest is a very clear and quick ranked voting system for making decisions.
We are dorks, and what we do is each person, each one of us, expresses their preference on a scale of 0 to 10, with 5 being I don't really care and won't be particularly annoyed whichever decision gets made, and 10 is the strongest possible desire for that outcome.
And it really helps us in communicating to avoid the common and complicated to navigate situation of nobody wanting to override another person's decisions, and therefore the decision waffling without a clear outcome.
Do you think you want Himalayan or a big salad for dinner? There's only one where we live. We live in Rough and Ready. There is one restaurant. It's a Himalayan.
It's Himalayan.
Would you like Himalayan or a big salad for dinner?
I don't know. What do you want?
Well, we had Himalayan last week.
Does that mean you do or don't want Himalayan tonight?
Well, I guess I'd say I'd like Himalayan a 7 and salad a 6.
Well, I'm a 6 on salad and a 3 on Himalayan.
No, I guess it sounds like you don't really want Himalayan, so we'll have salad.
We found this to really be a simple solution between the two of us, and it can be particularly effective in groups. It helps facilitate understanding by allowing people to clearly express their preferences and better avoid hard feelings later, either because one person's voice wasn't heard or because the decisions were made based on misunderstandings, which are so easy to have happen.
It can also help because a lot of times it becomes clear when playing this game that we don't always actually know what we want. I mean, I say, oh, I think I'd like Himalayan, and if we go to the Himalayan, I didn't want Himalayan.
So humanity needs to develop techniques and traditions for coming to terms with both new communication models and access to vastly increased amounts of information. There are those who argue that some types of information shouldn't be available. People just aren't ready for exposure to drug information or certain sexual imagery or whatever.
But the two of us continue to believe in open access to information. That what we believe is sort of fundamental is that the information just is not going away. That we need to learn to deal with it without just restricting it or banning it, and therefore we need to develop new ways of coming to terms with the access that we do have.
One of Terence's threads was to highlight the power of novelty and how people respond to it.
The human brain treats new things as interesting and more important.
With Spice, it took the efforts of multiple labs around the world to begin to sort out what was going on with the contents of that single green package from 2006. But there are other products. How many people do you suppose have tried Ivory Wave?
It's in a similar, shiny, corporate, mass-produced packaging. It's sold by the same vendors who sell other recreational psychoactives, though the manufacturer states that it's concentrated bath salts.
Groups of anonymous, aspiring drug geeks discuss in detail, in hidden corners and public squares of the internet, what effects they got when they snorted it, and what they think the unidentified active chemical or chemicals are. Oh, that's really
sort
hard
of
to
washed
see,
out.
that it contains. Is it 2-beta-carbomethoxy 3-beta-4-fluorophenyltropane, do you suppose?
Maybe. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe it's just fancy packaging for 4-methylmethcathinone, which has been popular for the last few years.
Or maybe it's MDPV, or PKMPMMA, or maybe it's Chinese ephedrine.
Or maybe it's really just bath salts. Nobody should put that up their nose.
Actually, I'm not sure whether it's better to have it be MDPV and snorted or bath salts and snorted. I don't actually know. Maybe we'll know in a decade or two.
Yeah. People are interested in these things because they're novel. But let's take a step back.
Spice and Ivory Wave aren't the only new products being marketed. What do you suppose is in Charge Plus or Doves?
You could be the first on your block, in your city, or maybe your country, to try Charge Plus.
And that's not some sort of weird endorsement, despite the fact that that may have sounded like a sales pitch. To do so, we certainly have moments of questioning what the world is coming to.
What is the world coming to? Some of the new research chemical products have been associated with deaths in Europe, and there are a number of reports of lasting neurological problems and highly addictive effects. People describing trying some of the new sort of research chemicals or some of these little packets, whatever. And one of the strange things, there's descriptions on some of the forums like Blue Light of people who describe snorting a line of the stuff, not necessarily enjoying it, but feeling like they need to do more. And then doing more, and then, well, they don't really know if they like it, but they feel like they need to do more, and then they do more.
Those ingesting unknown, untested psychoactive products are volunteering themselves as human guinea pigs, contributing to the state of knowledge, but also risking their health.
A death from the careless use of research chemicals also provides fodder for sensational news pieces that will continue to haunt that substance for the foreseeable future. Taking another step back, only a handful of people really around the world know for sure what's in these. There's always speculation until a definitive answer eventually gets out and the product either becomes known for being bunk, unpopular for not being all that good, or is actually identified as being active and fun, and then it gets banned.
For many people, there's a thrill that accompanies both taking a new substance as well as the challenge of trying to solve the mystery of what it is.
Tasting and comparing unknown substances and collaboratively working to identify them is the modern-day version of the Amazonian residents tasting the bark of every tree in combination with the leaves of every plant to see what they do.
But you can't tell the good snake oil from the bad snake oil, or effective from ineffective, dangerous from well-known.
These are all packages for products sold as party drugs, available as legal highs, and often, whether implicitly or explicitly, marketed as replacements for particular illegal drugs like mushrooms or cocaine.
Some contain chemicals brand new to the recreational market, some are just caffeine. And along with being sold as party pills and illegal drug stand-ins, they're sold as potpourri, incense, bath salts, plant food,
Or even plant growth inhibitors.
dewormers, room deodorizers.
So Diablo XXX doesn't identify its ingredients reliably, but notes that it's strong as hell. So you can kind of see it. Do not double drop.
But however, the new packaging on the right up there has added plant feeder and changed party pills to not for human consumption.
Otherwise has left the product the same. Summer Days is labeled as plant growth inhibitor there, but that phrase is juxtaposed with a babe in a bikini.
It's really a swirling blizzard of new products.
From the packaging, you can't even tell what's between what's chemical from what's herbal. The products coming out of some Chinese factory from a Central American garden.
This set of photos are all packaged products with identified psychoactive herbal ingredients. Although in putting these slides together, it's difficult to be sure that none of these include a synthetic research chemical.
There are all manner of psychoactive herbs now sold in glossy single-serving or 5-serving packages. I was talking to someone earlier who, was primary interest was sparked in this field in the mid-90s, and sort of reading about all of the sort of interesting South American plants and things that they were kind of unavailable, and now you can get them in pre-rolled joints.
There's pre-rolled Salvia divinorum and kratom joints. There's blue lotus extracts, seeds and pastes and leaves and roots, all ready to use.
Even the form doesn't particularly help. There are pills with herbal ingredients and herbal mixtures that have synthetic ingredients put on them.
And annoyingly, there seems to be an inverse relationship between how illegal the components are and how much it's marketed like an illegal drug.
If it seems from what we have found out that if it says that it's just like cocaine, it's more likely to be bunk. And if it says plant growth inhibitor, it's more likely to contain some sort of dark gray chemical legally dark gray.
Although this can all seem like just a vulgar, profit-driven marketplace, taking advantage of the inexperienced, it's also the cutting edge of science, where psychedelic and psychoactive mind expansion have their greenest tendrils.
Many scientists working in the field today are driven by their own experiences with visionary states. Bill Richards, who spoke earlier today, one of the key players in the Johns Hopkins psilocybin studies, was powerfully influenced in his career in part by his own experience on psilocybin in 1963, where he participated in psychology research in Germany, which involved no consideration at all of set and setting.
He first published about this experience pseudonymously in 1968, and then took full ownership of the experience in a peer-reviewed literature in 2004.
So I hope it's okay that we quote you, Bill. He described the experience, quote, "I was led to a dimly lit basement room with a small bed and end table, given an injection of psilocybin and left alone. The only, quote, music in this initial session, incidentally, was caused by the collection of the hospital's metal garbage cans in the alley outside my window. This I experienced as tinkling temple bells. To my incredible surprise, I discovered myself awakening into an exquisitely beautiful, mystical form of consciousness outside of time. In the midst of this incredible epiphany, Dr. Bayer entered with a white lab coat and stethoscope, asked me to open my eyes and sit on the edge of the bed, and was very seriously intent on checking my knee reflexes. As he hammered on my knees and scribbled down his findings, I sat on the edge of the bed with my arms outstretched, feeling infinite compassion for science in its infancy."
Dr. Richards, the senior researchers who are in their 60s now were in their 20s during the explosion of psychedelics in the 1960s.
The young people cutting their teeth on widely available research chemicals today, going through college, have grown up with access to extensive information about psychedelic subculture, and they will be the senior researchers in 20 years. 30 years.
I guess you could say that the 2000s are the 1960s of the 2040s.
We recently gave a talk at a hospital near LA where the average age of the audience was perhaps about 65. And this was the first time in our experience where only a single person in the room had heard of Erowid before our presentation. How many people have heard of Erowid before today? Excellent. Yep.
Slightly more than at that
Slightly
time.
more.
The one person who had heard of Erowid was the 25-year-old son of one of the hospital staff who had heard that we were talking and was so excited that he asked the hospital if he could come and bring all of his friends.
This very personable, very good-natured fellow wasn't allowed to bring his friends, but he came and talked to us and described that from the first moment of his interest in the topic, he'd been visiting Erowid.
But the older people who approach us at straight conferences like that one, who often preface their comments with, "I grew up in the 1960s," which is usually code for, "I've taken at least one psychedelic drug," mostly aren't aware of the depth of information available online.
They often expressed that they had great experiences with psychedelics, but after college, they weren't really able to stay connected to the psychedelic community or others who had interest or find out more, and so they lost interest. It will be fascinating. It will be very odd to see what happens in the future with the generations for whom communication boundaries have all but dissolved.
Every few months we hear from someone who's just gotten their PhD in pharmacology or chemistry or neurology or psychology, wanting to let us know that they've been reading Erowid for years and were inspired in their career choice by their readings.
In 30 years, the senior researchers will have grown up not only with access to psychedelics, but with access to a dizzying array of psychoactives and extensive information about them. Just imagine what research will be done then.
In the now, there are no hard lines between researchers and the subculture, though there are administrative and political velvet ropes that one tries not to disturb.
Riding the wave of communications revolution, members of the psychedelic subculture have access to the most recent research, like coming to this, all the scientific understandings about psychedelics, including mechanisms of harm like MDMA neurotoxicity, or potential spiritual benefits, like those documented by the Griffiths group at Johns Hopkins.
The lines between scientific researchers, pharmaceutical researchers, subculture researchers, and that chemistry geek in the college dorm are more blurry than they have been since before the explosion of psychedelics into the culture and the backlash against them in the mid-1960s.
Science is subculture, in that some of the substances on the research market come directly out of the commercial pharmaceutical labs.
Remember Spice's homologue of CP47497? It's named that because CP is the internal code used by Pfizer Pharmaceutical for all the new chemicals they synthesize.
The CP stands for Charles Pfizer, the company's founder.
Yet again, joining the ranks of LSD and MDMA, the active chemical in a new gray market product being used by thousands worldwide, and which has already been made illegal in a couple of countries, was invented by a mainstream pharmaceutical company.
One way we define science is by the collection and evolution of knowledge rather than the formal professional enterprise of academic researchers.
Arguably, the knowledge of the room full of people attending a conference like this will historically be judged as the state of the science of psychedelics in 2009.
The proof of this view is that the groundbreaking, what we consider groundbreaking psilocybin research, was not really new at all. The finding that psilocybin can occasion mystical experiences is not even remotely new.
It hasn't been new in centuries if one is willing to extend one's frame to include other cultures. But even within the frame of well-known English literature, it hasn't been real news in 45 years.
But that doesn't make the research any less valuable. It's something that all of the researchers know very well, and it's something they knew when they got started.
Formal peer-reviewed science is often not discovering things so much as confirming things that people already know.
The work being performed by psychedelic researchers right now is groundbreakingly parameterizing, groundbreakingly proceduralizing, and groundbreakingly documenting something that's long been known.
There are many things that people in this room could agree on about psychedelics that are not yet confirmed data points in the scientific literature.
In the now, what's novel is not any individual new product or discovery. What's novel is to be in a situation where there's a constant stream of new materials, new packaging, new ways of gray marketing materials so that people can find out about them who want them, as to keep them available for as long as possible before the law catches up.
What's novel about the current state of the stone is the combination of these new technologies with the ability to talk about those advances with an increasingly inclusive anyone. In the 1960s, new drugs were becoming available, but in the now, a vendor-producer can, in a 12-month period, theoretically choose a new drug, have testing done on it, mass-produce it, market it, get it advertised through the subculture, and have it sold and shipped to your door anywhere in the world.
The massive availability of psychoactives and the increasingly specific choices people have around available mind states brings up the question of what mind state you're looking for.
Where will the evolution of psychedelic knowledge go from here?
We're going to leave you with the thought that people in this room will have a strong impact on how those in the future think about psychedelics.
This now is a pivotal moment in the understanding of the complex relationship between humans and psychoactive drugs. Questions?
What do you see in the future in terms of electronic stimulation of maybe DMT in the pineal gland or something, producing an electronic psychedelic state?
Well, clearly digital drugs or the ability to, some technological drugs, psychoactives, are a big thing for the future, but are pretty much right now kind of, in their very early infancy. I think it seems pretty clear that, to me, it seems very obvious that it's going to happen, and they're going to have incredible fine-level control with over brain states and mind states without having to necessarily ingest a chemical. But it seems like that's going to be a while.
It's not entirely clear what technology that's going to be.
Right,
There's a variety of mind machines available now, but that don't, exactly, certainly challenge psychoactive drugs and effectiveness.
What's, one of the things that's done with rats, or primates is you take a wire and actually stick it right into the area you're looking to stimulate and turn on some juice. And that doesn't seem terribly appealing, but it also doesn't seem that far away that there would be a lot of much less invasive options where people would actually have things that are implanted. I like the sort of the William Gibson world of kind of future technologies doesn't actually seem that ridiculous. With the cutting edge of that being in people with limited abilities, limited vision, limited hearing, they're having sort of currently having problems resolved rather than having sort of abilities enhanced exactly. But there's transcranial magnetic stimulation that's being done, but the control is very fuzzy and gross. Yeah. It's not really very specific. And so they're mostly what I think you can do right now without sticking a wire in your brain, I think, is make you feel kind of stupid. There's other research with sort of, mystical consciousness been shown, but I think it's a little early.
There's certainly work with that. There was actually a series of products released sometime a couple of years ago.
iDoser.com.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. We haven't talked to anybody who thought they were particularly effective.
Yeah, they publish a lot of sort of first-hand experiences. Has anyone tried iDoser MP3s? How many people would say that they particularly liked the experience?
Yeah.
Good. So they have a lot of very positive experiences published on.
For those of you who don't know, they actually market it's the DMT soundtrack or the LSD soundtrack. It's supposed to create the mind state to match a particular drug.
Right, or that, you know, makes you really horny or whatever. So, generally speaking, you know, people don't really report effects. The main effect that I've had people reliably report who are willing to spend the time to sit through listening to some of the psychoactive sound things is facilitating meditation, sort of facilitating a sense of calm or relaxation. But, you know, you can kind of do that with really dull music anyway.
Question here?
What are your ideas for parents of the kids that are getting? Yeah, I'm a marriage and family therapist. So what are your ideas of how they can handle it, and what they need to look out for?
Let us know what works for you. You know, I honestly, we don't have children, and honestly, you know, it's a tricky conversation. I mean, we have nieces and nephews, and you know, our siblings who have children and our friends who have children are wrestling with all of those issues. And the fact is, I don't really know what to say. I mean, what I know what to say is, you know, try to be honest with them, but that's not very interesting to say. So.
We certainly get our fair share of, it's not a lot, but our fair share of complaints from parents, certainly about the work that we do in providing information. And one of the things that we've come down to in thinking about that and thinking, you know, about the challenges of that are that certainly if Erowid disappeared, for example, it's not like the information wouldn't be available elsewhere. It you know, in our opinion, would just be worse information they would have available. So the information is there, the kids are reading it, so then the question is, what do you do about that? And, you know, so far looking at the statistical data, it doesn't look like there's any dramatic increase in the use of psychoactives in general due to there being information available, although there's some evidence that perhaps it changes the way that people make decisions about what to use.
But there was one very small pilot paper study done where some teens were followed in their use of Erowid and some other online sites. And it didn't actually increase their drug use, it just changed their drug use. The paper describes that people chose to implement more, these teens chose to implement more sort of self-harm reduction techniques, but they also became interested in more things, a wider variety of things. I mean, one of the things that when we think about sort of the impact on teens and stuff, we think about porn, because oh my God, when I was a teen,
it's hard to avoid it.
I effectively was exposed to zero porn. I mean, there was a guy who had whatever.
Had a magazine.
Had a magazine. I saw. The world's not so much like that anymore. Kind of. I mean, it's actually in a content push situation where I open up my email and I have this flood of kind of waves of advertising for porn. Most of the links don't work, but it's for science. But if I turn Google Safe Search off, which I'm sure every teen boy will have tried, right? I mean, if we were doing some searches for images for this talk, and you know, I don't know what quarter of the
apparently
images
there's a porn star named Spice.
Oh, look. Right, exactly. Right. There's a porn star named Spice, and so, okay. Well, we're not going to put those up, I guess. So, it seems kind of similar to me. I don't know if other people agree, but it's. I mean, what do you do when your 12-year-olds are looking at seeing
hardcore porn,
hardcore right? Bondage and horse involving, I mean, I don't know what you do.
I am a mother. I have two children who are actually older now. My daughter's 25, my son's 27. They were the ones who told me what MDMA felt like. And when I had the opportunity to drop MDMA, it was like, whoa. Now, and I didn't tell them at first. And I was, through MAPS, we have, I don't know if those of you who belong to MAPS have received our emails over the years. My husband and I have potluck dinners, and we have discussions. And one of the discussions a year and a half ago was coming out of the psychedelic closet. Who do you tell, who don't you tell? And I brought up, I never told my children. Of course, I didn't come out of this, I didn't actually even get involved in it until I was 51 years old, so I didn't need my mother's permission. But my kids came out to me not asking for permission, just telling me. So when I came out of the closet to them, they hadn't heard of Erowid. And I introduced them to Erowid. And now they call me, and if they have a question, a problem, and I usually refer them to Erowid. So you have to be honest. You really do, because they're going to do it whether you want them to or not, whether you talk to them or not. They're going to do it, and they might do it the wrong way. My son was into huffing. He almost died. So I'd rather he do MDMA under, safe circumstances, knowing what he's getting into, than huffing. So.
That makes me think of is that I think one of the things I would tell kids, and certainly I would tell teens and college-age people and middle-aged people, is that there's a lot of time. It's not really necessary to try everything now. There's a lot of people who dive in at a rate that is perhaps faster than I think seems prudent, and that it's going very slow. If people are going to try psychoactives, trying them slowly as opposed to fast is safer and perhaps better for learning from them.
One last question then.
I just want to say, as a mother, how much I really appreciate you putting out that information out there, the truth about what these substances are, what they do, and people's experiences. Because I just had this conversation with my 10-year-old son who was doing a DARE poster, and he said he was going to do this whole thing with a medicine bottle and a fried brain and all that. And I said to him, did you know that marijuana is also used for medicine? And his eyes got all big. So I educated him. I said, well, see, they tell you that because they don't want you using it because you're just a kid. But this is the truth about it. And I feel that I'm the only one doing this. So I'm really grateful that there's information like Erowid out there so that we can put this information out and really, put the truth out there rather than the DARE crap that's going around.
I mean, MAPS has, I'm going to space on the phrase, maybe someone can say what it is for the generational parent and
Kids and
thing.
families and stuff.
Families. Anyway, we have a section on it as well, and people do describe very positive, effective, happy stories of interacting with their kids around psychoactives, psychedelics in particular. But we also
get a very difficult issue.
But it's a very difficult issue, and not everyone really particularly wants their kids to be tripping. We are. There's a conference coming up at Columbia soon about keeping your kids off drugs, and there's a good portion of the population that the idea of teens and college students tripping and taking all sorts of crazy research chemicals is not to their liking at all. So.
Well, that's all we have time for right now, so let me thank you, and please help me thank Earth and Fire.